Can everyone see that? You go to the bottom of your screen, Alison. Apologies for absence. I know we've got apologies from Anthony Hook. Do we have any other apologies? Councillor Hook.
No, I've Councillor Irwin.
Should be here. Unless he's offered apologies. No?
Yeah, I've had apologies from Councillor Irwin.
Oh, okay, great. In which case, that's all we are expecting. Can I ask anyone for declarations of interest? Relating to the meeting tonight. No declarations of interest. Super. We shall move on. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting and matters arising. I've got a couple of questions on matters arising. In item 160 on the agenda, which was the action plan, we did talk about the Faversham Community Land Trust and requesting the funding. Am I right in thinking that the Community Land Trust have now requested the funding and we should be in the process of transferring that funding?
Yes, we've received a letter requesting the funding and it will be on the payments list for the next Town Council meeting on Monday.
Fantastic. And 12 Marketplace Heating 169, has that actually been installed now already?
Yes, it was lovely and warm. Yes.
Yes, that has been installed.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my matters arising or questions of matters arising. Anyone else got any questions before we? If not, does anyone have any questions of the minutes in general, or was anyone happy to propose them? I'm very happy to propose them, to be honest. They're a good reflection. So I'll propose that we accept these minutes.
And I'll second.
Councillor Reynolds.
I'll second those.
Can we vote on that then, please, to accept the minutes of the meeting? I think Councillor Ben Martins, yep, raising his hand. Yes, it's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, I do have a cough this evening. Apologise. I can still taste and smell things, so it's not
good.
I can't pass it by screen anyway.
No.
Expenditure against budget report. I have quite a few questions, or a few questions on this. Does anyone else want to go first before I raise mine? Does anyone else have any questions? Councillor Trevor Martin.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. I've got one question, really, but it sort of stems over about 4 pages. There's quite a lot in both 210 staffing and in facilities management and a few other areas, business support, where there was no budget put for insurances into those, but they've now suddenly appeared with no budget. You know, sort of £1,000 here, £4,000 there. Can I ask, is that just we've split out the insurance bill from another heading, or is it just that they were never budgeted for it in the first place?
Yeah, Councillor Martin, it's just it's been put under the wrong cost heading, so it's been put under 210 and it should really be under 220 because the insurance 4,000 is budgeted under 220, but it's been costed under 210, so we can just get that moved over. So it has been budgeted.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Saunders?
I'm not going to ask the town clerk to go through each individual one, but there are a number of places where we've either gone over the budget that we've set aside, or considering where we are in the financial year, we're well ahead of what you might expect the profile to be. Could you just comment as to whether there are any areas where we should be concerned? And my second part of my question is just to be reassured that under the 2020 budget, the fact that it looks overspent at the moment just relates to the fact that we're owed money by KCC. Thank you.
Just before you go on, Town Clerk, to answer that question, on the 2020, I did have a question about whether we needed to allocate more funding, given the thing, but perhaps we can return to that. So, Town Clerk, I guess the major question is there anything we should be particularly concerned about where we're ahead against budget?
No, I don't think we should be too concerned. Obviously, we've had some additional costs, unexpected costs. Some of those are due to COVID, such as the hygiene 4180. We're overspending on that because we've got the additional hand sanitizers. Obviously, we didn't budget for those at the beginning of the year, but we've now got them on contract through Initial, the same with our other hygiene equipment. So it's things like that weren't obviously budgeted for, that we've had to get done. So I would say, I know Councillor Barker, you've highlighted a few. Did you want me just to clarify those items?
Yeah, so
highlighted.
Yeah, PAY and pensions, for example, seem to be, quite ahead of the curve.
Yeah, PAYE. I'm going to have to actually look up that. I didn't have the answers here because
Sure.
I just received the email a bit late and I was already at home.
Sorry, I should have
So I will need to clarify. No, that's okay. But I will clarify tomorrow on the PAYE, because looking at it, it looks fine, but I obviously need to see the breakdown at work. So that's that one. The rates at the Guildhall, that is a one-off annual payment. So that's why we've reached, I think we're at 98% or something for the Guildhall. So there won't be any more payments made for that. Now, the electricity in the Guildhall was another item that you raised a query on. Now, we changed electricity supplier at the beginning of the year, so we received an end of contract closing account, which was considerably higher than we were expecting. I think there must have been quite a few estimated bills prior to that. So our closing bill was just over £1,700, but that's underwritten by we get £1,000 a year back from the markets for their use of the electricity. So most of that cost would be due to, or part of that cost would be due to the market.
Okay. And pensions,
I think they were the ones that you highlighted.
Yeah, so they were pensions. Just on that, I mean, I know we highlighted, I think, an issue where we were underpaid last month, and I don't know whether we were catching up on last year on pensions, but clearly we're kind of, getting towards 3/4 of the way through the budget in 6 months. So is that because we're catching up on last year's pensions, or is that something you can look at tomorrow or something?
There's also been overtime so far this year as well. So obviously, the more pay somebody gets, it increases the pension contribution.
Yeah, but it feels like we'll have had some people doing 50% overtime to have got to a kind of 9-month position in 6. But perhaps we can pick that up outside this meeting if it's not clear. And yeah, I think my last question was on 2020, which I think Councillor Saunders has answered. And it was more from a position of care than concern, really. Do we need to kind of consider looking at budgets for 2020, Councillor Saunders, this year, in light of the fact that obviously we didn't necessarily expect it to have the emergency traffic order and do the work we've been doing? Or are you comfortable that the monies from KCC will cover any excess and we're in a good financial shape?
Well, my view as the vice chair of the committee, assuming that the current figure includes the money that we're owed by KCC, is that we've still got money in the budget, and that we should come in at the end of the year with a small surplus, which hopefully we can carry forward to next year. But I'll take the advice of the town clerk on this.
Yeah, just to confirm, we have received the £15,000 plus VAT back from KCC, and it will appear in the next month's report.
Great, thank you. And finally, and apologies for a last one, just the maintenance budget 4305 on the Guildhall again is looking overspent. I noticed there was another 4305 elsewhere on maintenance, which is considerably underspent against 12 Marketplace. I don't know if this is just a kind of an allocation question, or
no, this is just, we just need to do some housekeeping on that, because we've used reserves. So you'll see that in the final column, we've moved some money from earmark reserves to cover it.
okay,
Because Adam's working through the quinquennial report, so we're undertaking quite a bit of work that's come up over the last couple of years, so
thank you.
that should all be covered. I think Councillor Saunders, did you want?
I just looking in at the salary costs. I share the chair's slight concern about them, because if our salary costs are at 49%, you would expect both PAYE and pensions to be at a similar figure. So it would be helpful to see why that is the case. That in the case of pensions, they're kind of 17% ahead of where you would have thought they should be, because that would be a significant issue for us if that that carried on for the rest of the financial year.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Reynolds.
Would it be, I mean, I may be wrong, but we had an apprentice, we've now got a full-time member of staff. Would her salary, and then she would have become paying pension, I mean, that would have increased both figures. I don't know, but that I think happened partway through the year.
No, that's
No,
not the case.
No, doesn't do.
No, because no, that these are all the figures that were agreed in April, and
Right.
the apprentice
Agreed.
full
Yeah.
time from February.
All right.
I will look at the individual figures and bring back information.
Great, thank you. Any further thoughts or questions before we move on? Town Clerk, do we have to formally accept these, or do we just move over? Because it's not something we have to vote on, is it? I'm not sure.
No, but I would like them formally noted and agreed, or at least noted, please.
I mean, I'm happy to formally note them, but I think until I guess we get the updates on the pensions and the tax position, it'd be difficult to accept them. Councillor Ben Martin.
Yep, I'll just get the reference number off there. So with regard to the detached youth worker, which is 4806, I believe the youth working group referred the start of the process to recruit this position to the staffing committee. Has that gone ahead as yet?
I wasn't aware that that had actually been given to the staffing committee to deal with, so no, it hasn't. I don't know when or how that was agreed.
It was the last youth working group committee. We did state that we requested that it go to staffing committee for a person spec and job spec to be developed up, ready to start recruitment. I'm not sure where the information breakdown's gone, but it was certainly what was agreed from what I can recall of that meeting.
I've not been given or seen any minutes from that working group at all, and not been advised by anybody of that.
Okay. I'll take it up at the next working group meeting
Yeah.
and ensure that it's actually passed over.
I mean, if there are minutes for that meeting that you can circulate, Councillor Martin, and we can get a staffing committee meeting arranged, it can be dealt with. So it'd be good to get moving, I think, on that if we can. So Town Clerk, sorry for my lack of knowledge. Is it just me that needs to note these, or do you need a vote to note these? I'm not really clear.
I think at the moment, if you're not satisfied, although I mean the information is what it is, we can't unspend the money at the moment. But just if the committee just notes the report, that would be fine. Thanks.
Okay, I'm happy that we note it. Shall we move on to item 5 then, month-end financial report? Is there anything you'd like to talk us through here in particular?
Everything seems fine. What I have spoken to the finance clerk about are the unpaid invoices. So we've dealt with that. So that's the purchase ledger, unpaid invoices by supplier report, and you'll see that there is Abbey Removals. For some reason, we can't seem to send it back because it always bounces back. So that's why that's there. But he subsequently had a check now. Bulb Energy, we pay by monthly direct debit, but they don't send us a monthly bill. They send us a quarterly bill. So when we receive that, we put that on account. So that's why that's still showing there. I've asked the finance clerk to look at the EDF and tidy that up and make sure that that is all correct. And we've got the New Star Network invoices. So I've gone all through that list and that is being dealt with. And also the SAP.
So funny you raise New Star Networks. I wasn't clear what they did for us.
They are our actual calls. We use VoIP.
Okay.
They provide our calls.
Great.
And the same with the sales ledger, because I've just asked the finance clerk just to tidy this up. It just needs the payments put in against them, because quite a few of these weddings have now been taken place and we've received all the finance. So I've just asked her to tidy that all up. But they were the only issues that I could see. Everything else looked in order.
Then anyone have any questions or thoughts? Can't see any. Again, do we just note these, Town Clerk?
Yes, please.
Happy to note. And happy to move on if there are no thoughts or questions. Councillor Martin or Councillor Ben Martin, you still got your hand raised. Is that from the last? May well be. Thank you. Last issue. Work in progress report. To review the latest work in progress report, item 6 on the agenda. Did anyone have any questions or thoughts they wanted to raise? Or Town Clerk, is there anything you wanted to particularly point to in either successes or challenges?
I haven't got any comments to make.
I mean, I did spend a little bit of time reading this afternoon, and I am grateful for this document. I think it is really helpful to keep us on track. The only question I had in lieu of questions from the rest of the committee was on the Magna Carta and the Heritage Working Group. Only because I hadn't, unfortunately, I wasn't at the last town council meeting, which this may well have come up at. Have we made any progress seeking grants around that.
Would you like me to update you on that?
Yes,
Or-
please,
yeah.
if that's possible. Yeah.
We've currently got 2 live applications in for grant funding, both of which we're waiting for a response on. Hopefully the Viridor, we were promised by the end of this month. And we've also put in funding to Edward Vincent Trust as well.
Fantastic. Saunders.
Yeah, it was in relation to point 9, which is about lobbying public and private bodies to gain the best for Faversham. Under point A, electric vehicle charging points, we're saying that this is not started, check progress. I mean, presumably we're only talking about the charging points that Swale have put in the car park, and which I understand are due to go live very soon. So shouldn't we be, I would have thought it would be fair enough to say that that was in progress, or is there something else that we were planning in relation to that?
I'm happy to update that Swale Borough Council have undertaken it. I think there was a desire to start with that perhaps the town council was going to do it, but I think it's fair to say it's been done.
Councillor Ben Martin, you got a question?
Yeah, on exactly that point, I think it's worth us noting again in a public forum that the borough have installed their bit. It's waiting on Laser, which are the company which is wholly owned by Kent County Council, to actually install the meters so that those charge points can be used. And I think everybody in town would share our frustration at the fact that, despite the work being done by most of the way, it's frustrating to see a wholly owned company of a public sector organisation causing such delays. In addition, I was just going to bring up on the where are we on point 4, the youth side of things, that I don't think we've stopped. I think there is a case that, yes, in terms of item C there, that continued to operate the youth cafe, for obvious reasons that's not been possible at the moment, but on item B, work is progressing, but it's a slow process given that we've been unable to engage in the way that we would have hoped to through the youth with young people. It is hoped that we can rectify that in the coming few weeks and months, but it's not an easy time. I mean, let's be very honest and very blunt. With regard to time for councillors and officers, meetings are generally taking an awful lot longer than they normally would do, utilising as we do the video conferencing suites, and as much as we might all save a bit of time by doing them in terms of travel time, not travelling to meetings, making decisions and whatnot does take that bit longer, having to do a round robin of every councillor. And putting my Swale hat on for just a second in terms of the planning meetings, I know full well that a meeting that would normally take an hour and a half now takes 2 to 3 hours because you are having to go around all the time. So that's part of the reason why it's been a bit more difficult to engage with the youth than we necessarily would like to be. And hopefully as time progresses, we'll be able to improve on that.
Definitely.
As an aside, Councillor Martin, I understand that certainly the QE school, I think in the next half term, or they might call them terms now these days, between now and Christmas at least, are electing a school council. I don't know if we're engaged in that, but just as an aside. Any other thoughts on the work in progress report? Any questions?
If I may, on the last item, the Doddington Library, I know we were waiting quotations for additional shelving. How are we progressing with that? Because we ended up with more books than we thought we would.
we've had one quotation so far, and it seems very expensive. So we are trying to get other local joinery shops to quote, but they all seem very busy at the moment.
Yeah.
Struggling to get anybody to come and see us.
Any further questions or before we move on? No. Thank you very much, Town Clerk. That's a really useful report, and happy that it's noted. Moving on to item 7, supporting the renewal of the town offer to receive an update report and recommendations. I'm not sure if it's Councillor Saunders or the Town Clerk, or a mixture of the two.
I was going to speak to it, Chair, and I think the Town Clerk was going to add things. I think it's worth just taking you through what the paperwork that you've received. So the main bit of paperwork here is a report which addresses the issues raised at the last meeting, and that report's got some recommendations at the end. So I'll talk you through that in a moment. You also received an explanation of the ethical approach that the lottery management company we want to work with, Gatherwell, use, and an overview produced by them of how they work. Along with the electronic mailing that you've got also had a PowerPoint presentation which was given to me and Louise a couple of months ago by Gatherwell, and once I've gone through the other paperwork, if people do feel they want a bit more background, I'm happy to go through some of the slides on that presentation. But I think the first thing is to focus on the main report, which the Town Clerk has prepared following the last meeting. So this covers the costs of setting up a lottery and the financial implications, and there's also a report back on consultation with local groups. So I'll take you through this. So to start with, on page 1, you've got a summary of the costs involved in setting up a lottery, and you can see in total those costs come to just over £5,000. There is an option of purchasing marketing support from Gatherwell, but our feeling is that we could probably do that in-house, so there wouldn't be a particular need to purchase that. And then beneath that, you've got some projections about the returns that would be received from a lottery according to the number of people playing and the number of tickets they've bought. So that's calculated on the basis of people buying, these are Gatherwell's figures, for some reason 1.8 tickets a week, and playing the lottery over the year. I think there are other ways of looking at this, but basically I think if you think of if we had 600 players buying 2 tickets a week, that would mean an overall income of 56, or a return of £56,000, of which 5,600 would come back to the town council, and 28,000 would go over to partner community and charity organisations that were involved in the lottery. Or another way of looking at it is, if you can persuade 240 people to spend to buy £5 worth of lottery tickets a week, you're then up to a similar amount of money. So if 500 people bought 5 lottery tickets a week, you'd actually have a gross return of over 100,000. So there's some projections there. And then on page 2, the town clerks identified a number of areas where we're not going to be spending the budget this year as a result of the COVID virus. And in total, you've got £10,000 worth of underspend there. So one of the things we're suggesting is that this money could be redeployed into setting up a lottery. There's then an outline of the feedback that we've got as a result of consulting with local organisations. So in total, 20 organisations have responded to the consultation, and you can see that 18 out of 20 of them are saying it's now more difficult, or it's been more difficult in the past 6 months to raise money than it was previously. 17 out of those 20 organisations have told us that their income from fundraising has decreased during the last 6 months. And 17 of the 20 organisations who've responded to the consultation have said that they'd be interested in participating in a local lottery. So that's 85%. You've then got an outline of the ethical approach that Gatherwell takes. They've identified that for most participants in community lotteries, supporting good causes is the key motivation. That players of community lotteries tend to be in the higher social classification, so they're more affluent people. The Gambling Commission has identified community lotteries as low risk, and systems would be in place in order to mitigate the risk of problem gambling. So the maximum number of tickets that can be purchased is 20. The tickets can't be purchased on the day of the draw, and there's no instant wins, no kind of scratch card approach. So the overall recommendation we're making is that we should allocate half of that underspend from the events budget to a new budget line for setting up a Faversham and District Lottery. That the town clerk should be given authority to enter into a contract with Gatherwell to become our external lottery provider. She should also enter into a licensing agreement with Swale, which would allow us to run a lottery. And finally, that at the next meeting, we should, as a committee, have the opportunity to look at an initial project plan for implementing a town or a Faversham and District Lottery, so that you can have a look through the detail of how it would be developed. As I've said, I think if people want to have a bit more detail, and I know, although we gave quite a bit of detail last month, there is quite a lot of detail in this, so that you may feel you want to have a recap. I'm happy to go through the presentation in a moment. But by way of initial conclusion, what I would say is, I think if we're going to move forward with this, we do need the kind of active an enthusiastic support of everyone on the council. So I think if you've got concerns, it's important that you raise them now, because I think if we decide to move on this evening, we all need to kind of pull together and make this a success. Because if we do make it a success, I think it will reflect very well on the town council. If it doesn't succeed, well, I think that wouldn't reflect so well on us, but I think people would appreciate that we've been trying to do the right thing. But I think we should all try and make this a big success. So I'll leave it there, and I'll leave it open to you as to whether you would like a bit more detail through the presentation. But happy to take questions, and obviously I'll open it to a debate.
I've got one question of clarification, but before that, I think we've got raised hands from Councillor Ben Martin and then Councillor Trevor Martin.
Yep, sorry, Chair, it's just a very quick one to declare a non-pecuniary interest. Given the change to the political balance calculation at Swale, I'm not sure whether I'll have a place on the licensing committee or not for my group, and I haven't decided who will have it if we do have yet. Yeah, it's non-pecuniary, but it's worth mentioning. And also, just to clarify, were the Faversham Pools one of the groups to respond? Because if so, I'd have to declare another. I'd have to declare another interest.
Yeah. The town clerk, I think, might be able to answer that.
Possibly. I can't remember, to be fair. I think a lot of them were anonymous.
Okay. So possibly not then, Councillor Ben Martin, I guess, in terms of the...
If you heard me.
Interest. Yeah, I heard the response. Any more questions, Councillor Ben Martin, before we move to Councillor Trevor Martin? No, Councillor Trevor Martin.
Yeah, just one thought on this, and I mean, you said we had sort of 17 responses out of 20. I'm assuming once we start, and I am going to declare a non-pecuniary interest, I assume that when we start this, then other organisations may well want to hop on board. I'm thinking particularly things like scout groups and brownie groups and things like that, and youth groups and the like. Is that how you would envisage that growth initially, Councillor Saunders? Okay,
I didn't catch all of that very totally clearly. Were you saying that you envisaged that it would be a kind of rolling, growing development of numbers?
Of numbers of groups supported, yeah, because I'm thinking obviously there are certain groups in town that would jump on this, and I'm sure others, if approached, would probably wish to do so. I'm thinking particularly the youth groups, the uniform youth groups and the like, whether it be scouts, guides, air cadets, whatever. And also there are a number of organisations, I'm sure, in town that would benefit from the support from a lottery fund like this, that might not, for whatever reason, run their own. And I'm just wondering if that's how you envisage this, because obviously there are some very noble causes in town, and there are many different groups. And I'm just wondering, 20 are 17 responses. I presume there's room for more at a later date.
Yeah, in terms of making the lottery financially successful, there's definitely an onus on getting a good sign up of organisations, because they will draw in their own supporters. The lead-in for this is over several months. So because of the elections in May, we're probably, I mean, we'll come back with a detailed plan at the next meeting, but we're probably looking at this launching in mid-May, so 6 months away. And in the model development plan, what you would do from week 2 to from week 12, once you'd got everything in place, is you'd have an intensive campaign of trying to draw in organisations to be participants in the lottery. And that would include having things like a launch event for them. And certainly we'd be envisaging trying to attract as wide a range of organisations as possible. And the idea of calling it a Faversham and District Lottery is that we would draw in organisations in the East, the Swale East area as well. So yes, I mean, basically from assuming if people support this evening and it's endorsed by the Town Council next week, we would then be starting a promotional campaign to encourage organisations to sign up and get involved, and the more the merrier. I think the Tunbridge Wells, or is it Tunbridge? I can't remember. Lottery has kind of 60, 70 organisations that are involved in it, and I think others may have more. So it is the more the merrier, really.
Are there any other questions for? I've got one, Councillor Saunders, just and apologies, I think you went through this last time. So in the first worked example in the projections, the 600 players you mentioned, the 50% for good causes, those are the good causes organisations we've just talked about that sign up. So that money, it doesn't really matter whether it's that money or any other money, but that would go to local causes, which is I guess where this started from really, which is the desire to protect local assets. So that could be Faversham Cinema, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, the model is that you can run the lottery where 60% would go to the individual organisations, or you can, excuse me, run it on a model where they get 50% of the funding and 10% comes to the central organising organisation, i.e. the town council. And obviously if we do it that way, we would then need to have a mechanism for giving grants. It could be an expanded version of our own grants programme, or we have talked to the Rotary Club about an arm's length process where we weren't seen as being the organisation that was dishing out the money. We were using an independent organisation to do that. So that's a more detailed decision that we need to take in the next few weeks in terms of whether we do a 50-10% split or 60% going to the community organisation.
Understood.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions, or would anyone welcome a walk presentation? If there are no other questions, I assume we are ready to move to vote on the recommendation.
I think Councillor Saunders requires a seconder, and in that case, I'm happy to second.
I was actually going to ask if we could propose it to one of the recommendation first, and then a seconder. But if everyone's read their recommendation and you're happy to second, then I'm happy to move to vote. Can all those in favour raise their hand? That's unanimous. Carried. And I guess just to note Councillor Saunders' words here that we all have to play our part in making this successful. Yeah, I think we make this decision together. So thank you very much, Councillor Saunders. I think it's a partnership that will help deliver on the the original intentions to try and ensure that we protect some of our assets in the town. Right, moving on. Support for we don't want community grants. To receive an update on applications, confirm the allocations procedure. Town clerk, do you want to take us through this?
I won't say at the moment who we've received applications from, but we have received 3, so that's good. So we keep sharing the fact that we've got the community grant open at the moment. And I shared your document that you used last year. I think you just used that privately, didn't you, Councillor Barker? But also I shared a document that I got from Folkestone Town Council. It's just really you to consider if you wanted a scoring system to help you make your considerations next month. It was just, you know, just trying to make it a little bit easier for everybody. Although I will say, I think last year we actually received twice as much application than we actually had funding for. But this year, I think we will be fine. So it will make the job a little bit easier.
Can you, Town Clerk, can you talk us through the matrix example we've got from Folkestone so that I'm clear on how that works? It looks like people have an allocation of 100 as an example, and it's then prorated through as a percentage allocation. Is that right?
Yes, yes. Well, my understanding was that you score a certain amount and then the actual spreadsheet adds it all up for you, which makes it easier. So there's an outcome at the end.
I mean, I don't necessarily have to prefer something I've done, just because I've done it, and I do like the simplicity of the Folkestone model. The thing that I had tried to achieve, and I did share it with everyone post the last community grants session, so and probably a year ago, was that I tried to align it to our policy, our grants policy. So where our policy talks about kind of, you know, local benefits, for example, and does that body have a project structure or, you know, compliance and monitoring and so on. Whereas the Folkestone model, for all its simplicity, really is I guess about preferences amongst councillors for the recipients. I'm genuinely not wishing to sway the committee here. Is the hope for this meeting, Town Clerk, that we select a scoring mechanism so that when we come to review the submissions, assuming that they ultimately exceed the budget we've got, that we have a method of choosing between them?
I think it's up to you all as councillors to see what would be easier, but I think it would help you to have a basis that you could all work through that was set, really.
Any thoughts or questions? Councillor Saunders.
I would strongly support the principle of having a structured way of assessing the bids. I mean, I found the process we went through last year reasonably stressful, and I suppose having been a local government officer, I also thought it was a bit risky, really, because it, you know, if organisations did come back and say, I don't think we've been treated fairly, I didn't feel confident that we would have been able to have had good answers to that. So I think if you use some kind of scoring template, you do, you know, it might be pseudoscience, but there's an element of science. So I'd be very much in favour of a template. So I'm not looking at the detail of the two, but I think one based on what our criteria are is desirable. So if anything, I'd be probably leaning towards the work you've done, Chair. in terms of what we use.
Yeah. Structure to it.
Any other thoughts or questions, Councillor Trevor Martin?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Thank you. My thought is actually I agree. I think the Folkestone model would work as the second phase of what your system does, in that if every councillor were to score the local needs, local benefits, local impact, project structure, competence, monitoring and equal ops, and then that would and fed that into the Folkestone model, that would give you something. But I don't think we need to go to that extent. I'm quite happy to argue over the odd one or two numbers at a later date in a meeting when we've all had a chance to look at it. I'm sure we'll all come up with very similar numbers anyway on most of it. And I did like the way that was done. So thank you for preparing it, Chair.
Yeah, that's good.
So, I mean, Town Clerk, you might have to lead me a bit on this. Do we need to vote on the model now, or do we wait until we've received all the grants and confirmed that we have more to allocate?
I don't think you need to vote on it, but if you're all happy and you agree to use your model, I can populate that to make sure it's got all the information on it for the current application and have that ready for you for the next meeting. But I'll give it to you as far in advance as possible, so you've got plenty of time to read through all the applications.
That's great. Thank you very much. It's very kind. Saves the job. Okay, I think we can move on. Visitor and Events Development Officer to receive work in progress report. Is Claire with us, or are we walking through this?
I can walk you through it if you wish, Chair.
Thank you.
As one of the only marketing group member here. Part 1, proposals agreed at full council on the 7th of September. That's pending a planning commission inquiry, and we may need to revisit that at a later date. The information has all been collated, but if we decide to go, I think it's a question of whether we would want to apply for listed building consent to actually put the vinyls in the window. I think the information we were given prior to the getting this far was not necessarily fully correct, but we will await the advice of our council's conservation. And if we do need to go to that, then there may be a change in cost, so we'll need to come back to this committee. Although the marketing group have asked that the donation for the use of photographs from Mr. Warren that he asked to go to Faversham Camera Club, that we actually pay that anyway, because we wish to use that same image elsewhere. Footfalls and surveys, I think, speaks for itself. They're ongoing. Contact with local tourism events, that's ongoing. The social media, there for your note, how many followers and what sort of reach we're getting with our social media. One of the outcomes from the signage thing is the updated town map. Part of the planning conditions attached to 12 marketplaces that a town map would be placed on the rear wall outside. So to get that done and to deal with the report that we had last year of some of the town maps in car parks and places like that, where they had "you are here" stickers on them that have fallen off and are getting a little bit grubby and not looking good, to actually replace all of those and do that map on the back comes up to about £240, £250. So we're recommending we carry on with that. We've had the town walks leaflets reprinted because the Faversham Society ran out, and they were running out at Sainsbury's and other places. And it should be noted that many people have been seen using those in the
Yeah.
town during the lockdown period to find out.
Mm.
So
Very
that's been done, and we're looking at redoing the field trials leaflet, but without necessarily specifying businesses on the rear, because that changes frequently. And whilst we hope that every business on there will survive, we can't guarantee it. And we'd rather give people a chance to follow that without it getting dated. Obviously, the town newsletter, which we know about, and the visitor framework being coming into use, that's going ahead. Halloween, unfortunately, we can't do what we did last year around the shops and what have you, but with the town council is organising the virtual quiz and spooky streets and trailers. The Festival of Transport 2021. This will need to go. We will need to think about what we do with that, because normally the events manager would start the processes now for next May, and she's reluctant to do so without guidance from us as to whether we are going to have the event then or not. The marketing group's opinion was May would probably be too early, but to look to see if there is a possibility of organising the Transport Festival at a later date next year, possibly August, if the rest of the town council feel that that's appropriate. Other than that, I think the news and directory, which is a free directory type booklet that's coming through the door, I think it's £75 for a quarter page or £100 for a half page advertisement to advertise the Guildhall weddings and what have you, but that also attracts editorial and the front page, which would be that image that was going to go on the front of 12 Marketplace again as our as a Faversham. Other than that, as you can see, there's been some things done to help others within the town council, whether it be neighbourhood plan, 20's plenty boards, cycle fest designs and signage and business cards and things. Other than that, that's pretty much how the town marketing group have been operating and looking at how this will progress forward. Obviously, a lot of work's been done in the past few months on the town council's own website as well.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Martin. Firstly, I'd like to sort of thank the Economic Development Officer and the marketing group for producing this report. It's either signals the virtue of a good report that shows you what's going on, or it's it's actually good to see us sort of doing things and making a change. And I suspect it's a little bit of both. But thank you very much for doing the report. I think it's incredibly helpful to see what's going on. I've got a question myself on whether there is a proposal in here about the Transport Festival. But before we go there, has anybody else got any thoughts or questions on the report? Councillor Ben Martin.
Thanks, Chair. I thought I picked up on two proposals in there. Firstly, one regarding the Transport Festival, but secondly, I thought there was a proposal in there for a rescind motion on the previous full council decision regarding the window vinyls. Is that correct? Am I interpreting that correctly? If so, I'd be happy to second that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to second or third or fourth the rescinding of the vinyls, but not that I'm showing my hand. Councillor Trevor Martin, is there a proposal to rescind the vinyls?
We could propose rescinding that, yes, because we do think it's going to incur additional costs with Shire Borough Council and with for Planning Commission. And to be fair, we're hopeful that the Magna Carta project will take forward, and we think that by the time we get planning permission and actually get it to a point where it's fitting, we may actually want to change it all anyway. And that's being realistic.
A point of order for me from the town clerk, only because I don't not normally a stickler for rules, but Town Clerk, do remind me, if the council have made a decision, do we struggle to overturn that decision within 6 months or something? What's the considerations?
You at least six members need to agree the rescission motion. So if you put the recommendation, I will put it on the agenda for next Monday's meeting as part of a follow-up from this meeting, and as long as 6 of you at that time vote in favour.
Okay. So we need to continue that vote now. So
yes, so you should be recommending that a rescission motion takes place, because there's not enough of you here.
Proposer and a seconder. All those in favour of rescinding or recommending a rescinding to the full council, raise your hands, please. That's 4. Councillor Reynolds, 4 or against?
I just abstain at the moment.
And 1 abstention. So that's carried to take forward. Thank you, Ben Martin. The second proposal then was, I think, a proposal on potentially moving the Transport Festival to sometime in August.
Yeah, it's possible.
If I'm sort of right-hand planning on that, that feels like we're actually deferring a decision about whether to take it for a few months. So we're actually making a proposal not to hold in May, and then to hold a secondary decision if August is possible. What's the proposal, Councillor Martin? You're on mute, I think.
So, I'll defer to the Town Clerk because I think she had a comment before we go any further.
Yes, just to follow up, I had a meeting with Claire and we discussed the deferring the festival. She was concerned that there were other planned similar events already scheduled for August next year. I also suggested perhaps she looked into a rally in May instead. So she's doing some homework on that. I've pointed her in the right direction, and she's going to look into that, and then I think come back to the town marketing group with.
Great.
Thank you. Yeah, in that case, I would say that as far as the transport weekend is concerned, we're looking at what we can do with it. If that is the case, and we go down the road, it may be.
Okay, great. Then in which case, are there any other thoughts or questions on the work in progress report from the Economic Development Officer, or can we move on? Any other thoughts? None that I can see. Councillor Ben Martin.
Yeah, it was just a quickie. As Councillor T. Martin faded out completely towards the end there, and I couldn't hear him.
He did.
I was just going to say outright that with regard to having the transport weekend in May, I think all of us are in the position. None of us have got a crystal ball. None of us know what COVID regs will be in place, and it is perfectly possible to run a COVID secure event. I'm not saying it would be easy. But it is possible. So I think something in May is probably the right way forward. And if we have to postpone further down the road, we have to postpone further down the road. It's just one of those things. It's like everything else at the moment. It's throw your bit of grass in the wind and see where it lands.
Agreed. Any other thoughts or questions before we move on? No. In which case, thank you, Councillor Ben Martin. We'll move on to item number 10, the Faversham Town Council website to receive an update on the new website.
Would you like me to speak on that, Chair?
Yeah, I'm apologies. I think you might have to. Yes.
Okay. As agreed previously, we've gone ahead with Zonky at the moment, and we've paid 50% of the invoice. They are currently moving over all our information. We've been sending them photographs and things like that, and I've included the front page for you to look at. you should have received that.
Yeah, we've
And
got that in the pack, yeah.
that's all I've got to report at the moment. Sorry.
That's good. Any thoughts or questions? Happy to move on.
No.
Councillor Trevor Martin.
Interested.
Well, just one question. Do we know how long they think it's going to take to actually swap that all over? When it will go live, in other words?
I think it will be another couple of weeks with the moving the information over, and then the rest will probably be down to me checking that everything's moved over properly and tidying things up. So definitely before Christmas.
Good. That's good.
Great.
Start then. Yeah.
Any other thoughts or questions? No. In which case we'll move on to item 11 on the agenda, the ethical procurement report. Before I hand over to the town clerk, I have a question on this. Is this another agenda item where we are just making a recommendation to full town council and this will move to full town council, town clerk, or is this one that you are hoping that we can approve and move forward on our own? And the reason I asked the question is I read the report, most of which I had massive sympathy for and supported the broad outcomes, but I couldn't help but feel that any ethical procurement policy should also consider our the fact that we've announced a climate emergency and probably should have a consideration or an angle from climate, and therefore the best councillors to make those considerations don't actually sit on this committee. Sorry, town clerk, I guess the question is this just for recommendation to full town council, at which point it can be amended, or is this for us to agree and approve and move on?
It's for recommendation to the full council. I think that would be, as you say,
Yes.
most fair.
Mhm.
Great. Do you want to? I mean, it's fairly straightforward, but town clerk, is there anything you wanted to talk us through on this?
Not really. As I think it's a difficult decision because you've got to think, on the one hand, it is more expensive, but that may not be the most important thing. It's whether, as I've said at the end, we just use our discretion at the time. I will say it does take a lot of officer time to look for the cheapest. We do shop around. It's just very, it's not, I don't think it's a black or white answer, to be honest.
No.
No. Any thoughts or questions?
No, I propose that we take this to full council. Oh, sorry, councillor.
Councillor Ben Martin.
So I think Councillor Saunders was ahead of me. I'll
Sorry,
give way.
Yeah.
Councillor Saunders. Apologies for not seeing.
Okay, I think it was a bit marginal who had their hand up first, but anyway, I've got a number of, I suppose, queries and concerns in relation to this. I was trying to remember where we had the discussion about introducing an ethical policy, but I thought the discussion was a bit broader than prioritising local businesses, and it was potentially around issues like environmental impact and moral issues and political issues. I mean, personally, I've got some reservations about when you should favour local businesses. I mean, if they're just a distribution business, I think it might be quite arguable that you should favour them, because you've in the paper you've identified that there are issues around a Faversham-based business might be then selling things which aren't produced ethically. So I think there's a number of issues here, and I would have thought, rather than making any change to the policy immediately, the first step here really is to have a thought to what our ethical procurement policy we want to have. And I know, for example, Swale and most local authorities have got ethical procurement policies, and we might do best to look at those and see if we want to adopt one of those, because I think most of them will be based on national models, or there'll be ones that are being used across the piece. So because I think in the paper the suggestions at the back are probably are competing suggestions, and I would propose a suggestion that we develop an ethical procurement policy, and at this stage don't actually make any decisions about changing our existing policy. I think clearly there are, from the work you've done so far, there are some financial implications of changing. I think it needs a bit more consideration before we rush forward and make any decision.
Definitely.
So I had a proposal there, which is to consider a wider policy and prepare a wider policy before we make a recommendation to take anything forward to full council. I'm minded to second that before we do. Has anyone got any other thoughts before we vote on that? Councillor Ben Martin, I think you're next.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. I'm of a similar mind, to be honest. I think procurement, we first of all, we have to bear in mind that we are under a duty to obtain best value for the taxpayer, first and foremost. Now, how we define best value is a matter for ourselves down the road. But I do think having a single procurement policy is a bit of an awkward beast in itself, because actually it's very different. Procuring a new box of pens for the office is very different from accepting a tender for something else that's going to cost a lot more. For example, the shelving units that we discussed earlier for the Doddington Library. And we do need to separate that out to an extent. Obviously, on the bigger jobs, there's always going to be a preference to try and put that money into the local economy. Given that Faversham doesn't have a stationery shop and hasn't done for a number of years now, it's very awkward to suggest that we put localism 110% at the top of our procurement basis. And we do need to look at the other ethical issues regarding the environment, climate, in terms of who's manufacturing. It's just, it's too early to make any form of informed choice on this. And I think, it needs the input from the Climate and Biodiversity Committee as well, before we can really make a recommendation to full council. So I'm more than happy to go along, and I'll allow you to second as you wish to do ahead of me, and I'll just vote with yourself and Councillor Saunders.
I do wonder, Councillor Saunders, before we perhaps go with that recommendation, whether actually, and this is just food for thought really, and welcome Councillor Saunders' view on this, whether we ought to take it back to full council to get a very small working group together to look at the policies. Because it strikes me a couple of things. We don't have everyone with the right skills on this group.
Yeah.
There are some skills missing. We do have some good skills here. And clearly, to the town clerk's point, I think you make in the paper, or maybe I've just inferred that town clerk, ultimately the officers have to deal with it on a day-to-day basis. So it needs to be workable and something that can be delegated. You don't want to come to council every time you want to buy anything, frankly, or make certainly the smaller purchasing decisions. So Councillor Saunders, I wonder if it's worth making a slight amendment to the recommendation and say we take it to full council to ask for a working group for people to sit in a small working group of, say, 3 or 4 people at most to look at that policy. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, that seems like a sensible suggestion, really. Yeah.
Great.
So if you have a recommendation, I'm happy to second. Should we take a vote on that? All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. I think that's us. No, one more. Items for report. Information for items for next agenda. Is there anything you particularly wanted to draw out, Town Clerk, or were you just seeking?
Yes, I wanted to get confirmation of whether you all wanted a finance workshop in December and what date. And I'm assuming we'll do it virtually.
I mean, I think it worked really well last year, and I think it was very helpful for that whole budget planning process.
Definitely.
I think it's good to raise it in people, not just on this committee, but across the other committees as well. So I'm in favour of holding something in December. As for dates, like you say, I think it'll be virtual. But I suggest we look at a doodle poll for dates. Do we need to vote on that as a recommendation, Town Clerk, or are we just happy to?
No, just confirm that you're happy for another one this year. That's fine.
Yeah, I think it was a really good idea last time. Councillor Ben Martin.
Yeah, in conjunction with the with that, I mean, I know it's about the budget process. I think perhaps during that day, that if the first hour can be to look over the action plan, just so that we decide what the key actions are going to be for the next year. I think it's worth bearing in mind that we are depleted in numbers at the moment, and as such, I don't think we're going to be in a position until May to run as many working groups as necessary we would like to be doing. So it may mean that some of the priorities have to be dropped.
Agreed. That makes perfect sense.
Definitely.
Any other thoughts or questions about the workshop? No. Thank you. Town Clerk, is there anything else you wanted to raise here, or?
No, thanks. No, thank you.
Okay, I think that draws us to a close. The date of the next meeting is the 23rd of November. Thank you very much for your attendance, and we shall all be speaking soon, no doubt. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night.